All right, I think we're ready to go. Hello, this is Dennis Bailey. This is from Crosstalk Podcast. Usually Rebecca Nettles does this podcast, but she will not be with us this evening. So I am the one that will be leading this time together. Um, this is brought to you by MK Connect. MK Connect is under Compass Ministry. The thoughts and opinions expressed here are independent of the Compass Ministries. Today we have a guest, Bret Taylor, with us, who will be sharing about youth ministry with MKs. Welcome, Bret. We're glad you can be here with us. And could you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Sure. Thanks, Dennis, for having me, and uh, appreciate getting to know some of you and reconnecting with a few that I've known before. Yeah, Bret Taylor. I grew up monocultural in California and lived there most of my life, but always felt a real strong pull towards missions. And after college, headed over to a place that Michelle knows well in Kenya, and was able to work there with a church planting group. And weird stories and circumstances that I think we'll go into a little bit later, and end up getting connected with missionary kids. And that just changed the course of my life going forward. But I am married to my wife, Mindy, who I actually met preparing for the missions field. That's a wild story. We have three kids. My oldest is in college, and I have one in 10th grade and one in 7th grade. And we live in North Carolina right now. And it's actually kind of nice today outside. Not too hot, not too cold, just right. So, yeah.
Awesome.
And we
Sounds
have a
great. Sounds
dog
like
too, Cooper. Everybody has to have a dog, right?
very good. Awesome. So today we're talking about like MK youth ministry, and that's kind of the topic that we're having at the table. And so the question we have is like, how did you get involved into MK youth ministry? Like, what was that point where you realized that you were called to this?
Yeah. I was very involved in my church growing up in California, and even through college was very involved in youth ministry. And so took a lot of youth ministry classes in college and was involved in doing internships and things of that nature. So youth ministry was, I'd say, part of my DNA from early on. But when I went to Kenya, my calling there was to introduce the concept of youth ministry to the Maasai people in Kenya. The churches had been planted, and they were trying to get the youth ministry programs going there. So I was going there to do that. But then a strange thing happened. I would go to my team meetings, and instead of paying attention to what they're talking about at the adult table, I was more interested in what these missionary kids on my team were doing. It was interesting. They were talking about things that were very strange, and I didn't understand. I hadn't heard anything about this in any of my youth ministry classes. Or they're talking about how they're like being there, but they kind of would rather be somewhere else. Sometimes they're not really sure where they fit in, and they're starting to talk about things. I'm like, wow, I can understand a little bit about what you're talking about, but I've never understood or heard anybody talk about these things. So um, in the series of events, God just opened up the opportunity for me to attend a seminar at RVA. It was our senior seminar where I first heard the term third culture kid and was introduced to a lot of the concepts of transition for kids. And all of a sudden, it just blew my mind open. I'm like, this needs to be made available to the kids on my team and other missionary kids. This is great information. So I ended up working at West Nairobi School in Kenya as the chaplain, if you will, did youth programs there, volleyball coach, all kinds of fun things. And I had an invitation to continue working there, but I came back to the States and got married. Long story short, one of those funny things where you think you know where you're going and it takes a little turn. The school got closed while I was a month before we got married, so it's kind of hard to go back to Kenya and continue working at school. But we really felt burdened to work with missionary kids, not as boarding home parents, not as teachers. We saw the value for that. We felt something different, kind of helping kid through transition. And then the opportunity came later in 2005 for us to join Wycliffe Bible Translators and to work out of their base in Jars, North Carolina, where I was a youth pastor to the missionary kids there and kind of all over the globe for them. So it was an unexpected journey. I would have never told you that, but in looking back on my life, I see that there's a number of MKs that were in my life through middle school, high school, especially college. I had a lot of missionary kids in my college, and Um, it's like God was like sticking little breadcrumbs in that trail, but didn't recognize it till he got me there. I would have never expected it, never saw it coming.
So do you think that it was like a slow process, a gradual process that you kind of stepped into the MK youth ministry, or was there like a point in your life where you came to the realization and you had to make that decision?
I would say it was more. There was little pieces along the way, but that pivotal moment was definitely listening to RVA seniors have their presentation about what TCK ness is about, and then that was like a moment. It was back in the day when we had these overhead projectors and these plastic transparencies. I don't know if you guys like would understand what that is, but anyways, I literally didn't give the lady who did the presentation a chance. I told her I'm taking these things from you, and so I'm taking her things and copies, everything I can get my hands on. I'm like, this is important. This needs to be known. This is there's words for the things that I've been hearing the kids on my team talk about, and I just couldn't figure it out. And all of a sudden, someone put all the answers there together in a way that I'm like, more people know about it. And so I just felt overwhelmingly called, and my team affirmed that I seem to be gifted at working with the kids on our team. And so just continued on in that direction.
So what was the point in your life where you're like, I'm now ministering and you're working with the MKU? But when was that point? Like you woke up and realized this is what I'm doing.
Yeah, the seminar definitely affirmed that, but it was, God, how he kind of works different things out in different ways. I had been working with and doing youth ministry with the Maasai people, and because I didn't speak Maasai, I had a guy translating for me. And if you've ever been in one of those situations where you have someone translating, you know it a little bit. When you say something, you know when he's translating. And then it became obvious, like I did the seminar, he translated for me a few different times. And the first time, like it felt regular. Second time, I'm like, I think he's doing something a little different than what I'm doing. And the third time, it got even more so that way. And I realized he's not translating for me. He's actually explaining it better than what I'm doing to his own people. And I'm like, okay, at this point, I am no longer necessary. And so it became clear I was becoming the obstacle in continuing that ministry. So we kind of brought him onto the team, and he trained youth pastors at a faster rate than I could have ever done. And it was at that same moment that the God also said, okay, I'm closing this and making it clear that this is the next space for you to go into. So sometimes you get the writing on the wall. It comes in different ways. So in this particular case for me, doors were closed, and then he affirmed it through people, through prayer, through circumstances that he was wanting me to head into working with missionary kids.
Awesome, very good. So like one of the questions that we have is, what is the most common weaknesses and strengths that you have noticed in MK? So we'll make it that two question. So what the first question? So the first question is, what is a common weakness that you see like constantly in all the MKs that you work with?
A weakness, yeah, or challenges. Sometimes we don't like to talk about weakness. That's not PC. So we say, what are some challenges? What are some
Sounds like
opportunities
good.
to overcome? Um,
Sounds
I
like it
think
sounds much better.
there you go. This is a pet peeve of mine for missionary kids in particular, not just third culture kids, but especially missionary kids. Um, Humility. I get so frustrated that I think we're gonna ask me to follow up on the strengths, but the humility and not sharing some of the things that you have within you and is wired in part of your DNA, and underselling yourself. Multilingual. Oh, I don't really speak Portuguese. Well, I only kind of know this, and I'm not really. And like I get that, and there's legitimate reasons for feeling that way. You're tired of getting burned. Monoculturals don't get you. They start asking all these questions you don't want to have to answer. You feel vulnerable, so you kind of tuck it down and bury it. And so I would say a weakness for many missionary kids is just not being willing to affirm what God has put into their lives, the gifting that they have, and I don't want to say brag about it, but to let people know and put it forward more. That would be a weakness that I would see and kind of a pet peeve. But without a doubt, challenges of high mobility is an issue, and the related rootlessness and roots in relationship, and that unresolved grief and loss that sometimes happens. Sometimes we talk about ambiguous loss. Those are all things that it's hard. It's really hard. It can be sneaky, and when not addressed and acknowledged, can be really detrimental to people. And sometimes it comes out in funny ways. Quick story, I know, and actually, I wish it was just one story, but I think this happened to at least two different people. They've hid their MK identity so much that people had no idea that was a part of who they were. And there's a story of a guy who went to go meet, got engaged, brought his fiance to his family's house to meet his parents, and all of a sudden she's starting to see on the wall, kind of like maybe how your house is, all the pictures of them living overseas and in the village, and with the only white kid in the picture, kind of thing. And she's like, she felt so betrayed. She's like, why have you not told me about this? I didn't know anything about this about you. And so I think it's a detriment when that happens, when it's closed off and withheld and kept secret. I get it. I do. I get why there's a protectionism that happens there, but I would say that would be kind of something I would describe as a weakness, or something I would love to see missionary kids work through. Did you want me to answer the other side of that too, Dennis? Unmute me. Oh, Spencer, I think you muted Dennis. He's like,
No, I
unmute
muted
me.
I'm sorry, I muted myself and I was like, I can't unmute. I can't mute. They're not gonna hear me anymore.
I'm like,
Okay.
dang, I said
I
something
really appreciate what
inappropriate.
you
He's mad at me. He's like, okay, can we get rid of this guy?
I should learn sign language. No, just joking. So yeah, I really like what I really like what you said, that the point where sometimes and I'm gonna use my own personal experience with being an MK. So even I at times feel insecure about the capabilities and the the things that I have to offer. I have
Mhm,
often downplayed it, just like you said, and I can
mhm.
totally relate to that. So I want to throw another question to you. What could you tell us to help us to become more secure, or how can we become I'm searching for a word here, but how can we become I'm still at a loss of words.
I think I get
But
where you're
how
going with this. How
go
how
ahead,
can
take the go
Yeah,
for it.
I mean, this kind of plays into the strengths that I think you're going to ask me eventually, but recognize, and this is true for anybody. This is not just an MK thing. This is for anybody. God has given people gifts and experiences, and I believe those are treasures that are meant to not just be hoarded, but to be shared with others. And so, when you hide those things and don't believe that they're valuable to other people, you cheat people out of it. When you're as a Christian, your relationship with Christ is not meant to be hoarded, but is meant to be blessed with others and telling people, you're saved to serve, where God changed your life, and now you have the opportunity to tell others about the opportunity that you experienced. And so, as an MK, if you could have that mindset of like, I have these precious pieces that people need, these are missing pieces in the body of Christ, and to take those risks. And I will say, unfortunately, sometimes when you take those risks, you do get burned, and it is a real thing. But if you believe that God has called you for a purpose and a reason and equipped you uniquely, and look for those opportunities. Here's the hardest thing I think about being a missionary kid is that people don't know to ask you for those gifts. They don't know that they need that. If you can imagine, maybe a bad example of this, but popped in my mind. My Maasai friends loved them, but I had them come over to my house once, and I fed them spaghetti, and they thought that was fantastic and stuff like that. And then we started talking about how cold it was, and I'm like, oh my gosh, whatever, it's not cold at all. But for them, they felt cold because it was below 70 degrees or something like that. I'm like, cold is ice, and they're like, oh yeah, we've heard about ice. What is it? Well, I had a freezer, so I'm like, here, have some ice. And so I gave them a piece of ice, and I put it on their hand, and they both threw it down immediately and yelled the word that Kali, which translates hot. So they used the word hot to describe ice because they had never felt anything like that. They just knew they needed to get it off their skin right away because it was an uncomfortable feeling. So sometimes you don't have words, you don't know what you're missing until you experience something. Same my two brothers, James and Jacob, I love them so much. I introduced them to ice cream, and man, it was cold for them at first, but then they couldn't imagine not eating ice cream, so I ruined them at that point, right? They loved it, but you don't know that you need ice cream until you've had ice cream, right? And then so in some ways I would say the same is true with the church. They don't know that they need your MK-ness until they've experienced some of your MK-ness. And then they go, oh, and then they want more of it. So like I've seen some MKs who step up and get involved in their church and let them know, hey, I can help prepare your team a little bit to do your cross-cultural missions trip so you'll stop being so ugly American over there and stop being rude and say, oh, wait, sorry, this is recorded. I should probably be careful what I say here. And so, I love it when I see the churches go, oh, this is so helpful. This is so good. And then they start asking the missionary kids to, hey, can you help do a training? Actually, can you help us plan and lead these trips so that we don't keep painting that same fence over and over again, that we actually do real ministry? Dang it, this is being recorded. Can we edit this out later, somebody? So I think you get what I mean, though. So, you got to share it. And sometimes people don't know that they need your gifts, and they don't even accept it at the first time. They throw it down. Kylie, it's hot. I don't get you. Who are you? You're weird. But keep being vulnerable. Risk yourself, just like sharing the gospel. Some people are going to accept it. Some people are not. You need to be responsible with sharing the gift God has given you. So
That's so good. I really appreciate hearing that. Just kind of like brings like a light on, it turns a light on in certain places or certain points in my life. So so the next question, and it's still tied into the same one, what is the most common strength like you see consistently over, maybe you already said a little bit of it, but
uh,
what's like a common strength you see in general in most of the MK?
well, okay, so this one maybe not a strength, but this is one of the ones that came to my mind. This is
Go
not
for it.
this is not my terminology. I borrowed this from Libby Stevens. If you've ever talked or met with her, but she talks about MK sexiness, and I think it's so funny to me, but it's so true because from a monocultural view, missionary kids are exotic. I'm like, wow, look at this. Ooh, you've done this and you've traveled, and whoa, you speak these other languages and you're mysterious, and I keep learning all these stories, and oh my goodness, you wrestled anacondas in the Amazon and all these little things, and like, oh my goodness, and that's so cool, and ooh, mysterious and unique, and you're not like all the other boys I've ever met or all the other girls I've met. And so Livy describes that as an MK sexiness, and I think that's hilariously embarrassing, but I think there's a truth to it. And I don't know. I say go with it. Like be comfortable with that, and know that that's part of that, who you are. That uniqueness is a cool thing. Now, obviously, sometimes people can take that and twist it, and it goes to a scary place where they use it against you, which is sad. But I think it's fantastic. So that was the first thing that popped up in my mind. I think, and I'm not. This is not unique to me. It's been said for decades now. I think MKs and TCKs, the larger group, play a unique role in the world. And as far as there's an important piece that I think MKs can play in solving some of the world's problems, and helping to navigate this world that can't be done by a traditional monocultural. MKs by almost their DNA are hardwired to be bridges. They've bridged cultures their entire life, and they've moved between worlds so much. And that is such a unique gift, to be able to understand and value and hold in almost equal hands the value of two cultures, and say, yes, these are both valuable, and not just this is mine and I'm going to have to learn this one, but to value both cultures. And so to be able to translate between cultures, and I'm not just talking about language translation, I'm talking about translating cultural values. I'm talking about helping people to understand and grasp things in a different context, to add the third dimension to geopolitics, where it's not just maps. All the news today in this context talking about the invasion of Russia into Ukraine. Everybody's pointing at the maps and showing things on the maps. for many people who are involved in missions and missionary kids, usually you're having people that you're connected there. And so you see a dot on the map, but you're thinking about a person there, or you're thinking about a context that you have seen or know people who've been in a similar conflict. And so you're borrowing from places that monoculturals can't do. And so you can bridge those communities together in a way to, I don't want to overstate it, but bring world peace. I think it's a gift that, I mean, we say international businesses without knowing it, they heavily recruit missionary kids and third culture kids because of that ability to bring commerce between countries that it's otherwise difficult to do. So, yeah, those were the two that came to mind, just that ability to be those bridge people and that MK sexiness.
That's awesome. That's so good. One thing I heard growing up, it really helped me to be careful because I'm playing it back into some of our previous conversations today, and sometimes when we talk and we don't realize it, we sometimes say when I was in or when I was some such and such place, when I was in such and such place, we often transmit maybe like weird something that other people aren't, and it happened to me without realizing it because one time I said, "Oh, when I was in California and I studied there," and then this guy was like, "Oh, wow, you traveled a lot," and it just kind of like changed the atmosphere in a way that I didn't want to,
Yeah.
and so it kind of like it didn't intimidate me, but like I don't know if this is something you could talk about, but is what kind of advice could you give us in case so we can know how to bridge the connection between people before we like talk about where we've been, what we've done, and etc.
Yeah, there's a whole lot of things that, I mean, I do whole seminars on that topic alone. You just mentioned one. Just the way you asked your question, you described where instead of when, and you need to understand for most monoculturals they speak in whens and not wheres, and most missionary kids speak in wheres and not whens. So you're more apt to say when I was in Kenya, I blah 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 blah, instead of a monocultural like myself. I'd say when I was in third grade, when I was in 10th grade, or I talk about time more. When I was 30 years old, I did this. And so being aware and cognizant of that one slight change and taking the wheres out of your conversation can help to build those bridges that sometimes your wheres are unnecessary to the conversation. Removing those wheres from the conversation can allow you to continue to have and build a relationship there without seeming sometimes arrogant. While it can seem exotic and sexy, you guys have in your multiple high mobility, there's a one-upping that some monoculturals will feel like you're doing. Oh wow, you've been here and here. I can't compete with that. You're just like rubbing it in our faces. So taking the wheres out of your conversation, that's a hard thing to do, but be cognizant of that. That would be one piece of advice.
That was good. I never thought about that. So that was something that was a pretty good that's a good takeaway for me this evening. So I wanted you to share a little bit about the magazines that you guys do among worlds. Could you just like share briefly about that, and then hopefully we can get. I've been reading it these days. I finally was able to print it out because I can't get on a computer. I start reading it and it's just like time gets by and I forget where I got left off. So it's like I'm just gonna print it out and I print it out. So it's great stuff. Could you share about that, please?
Yeah. So Interaction International, the organization I'm a part of and help lead, is been producing these magazines, if you will, called Among Worlds. Originally, it was a printed magazine, but lately we've been producing it digitally. And if you want to go on to Interaction's website, you look under publications, you can find Among Worlds. And about half the magazine is usually free, so you can just read through it. And if you want to do it all, sorry, we do need to pay our bills a little bit, so buy a subscription. But we say it's a magazine by TCKs for TCKs, and we talk about different issues, different topics, and it's great. And we're totally relying on TCKs to submit articles, and so we have all kinds of different people contributing to that. Sometimes it's poetry, sometimes it's opinions. Next article we're having coming up should be an interesting one on politics and MKs and politics, because how do you navigate that? what country do you root for in the Olympics? You know, when they do the Parade of Nations, you get frustrated when the U.S. is highlighted, but then they do commercial break, and then they skip. You know, the five countries you're really looking forward to, or do that. So where do your political allegiances lie and your mixed alliances there? Um, so yeah, Among Worlds is great. Some good articles. It's fun to see and hear different people's takes. And I think one of the values of it that people enjoy is that they sometimes you don't know how to express something, or you know something's there until you see somebody else articulate it. You go, oh, yes, that explain. Oh wow, I didn't even. Now you've identified, you've articulated something that I've been wrestling with. So one of the values of, and there's podcasts and other things, but Among Worlds covers different issues. Hospitality was another one. We've done relationships, how TCKs do relationships differently. That was another one we've had. We did one on arts and TCK and arts, and that was actually one of my favorite ones we recently did, where music, art, and expressing TCK-ness through that venue. Those outlets was something I liked about in Among Worlds.
That's awesome. So if anybody's interested, I know you guys offer like a bulk price. We were able to about a year ago get together with 7 6 7 MK, and we're able to sign up as a group. And so if anybody's interested, we could do that again. I think our last subscription was just received like a couple of weeks ago.
Yeah.
And so if we want to continue doing that, if anybody else is interested, we'd love to get another group of people and sign up and continue receiving those awesome Among World magazines. They've
Nice.
been blessing to me. Just reading different people's perspectives just kind of like helps keep that mind open and continue to learn. So continuing on with the conversation here, MK Youth and youth ministry. The
Mhm.
next question we have is what challenges do teen MKs have that are the same to the average American teens? Have you noticed like because sometimes being an MK, we think we're the only ones going through what we're going through or whatever.
Mhm.
But like from your perspective, what can you say that you can see both go through that is similar?
Yeah. What do both MK teens and monocultural teens have in common? Puberty. I think that about sums it up. So, I mean, it's more than just the hormones and stuff that you're going through and figuring out your body and all that other stuff. And I think to a certain degree, MKs have a little bit harder time because the whole conversations tend to be less appropriate and more buried in the missions community, unfortunately, and so access to knowledge isn't the best. But the other thing, oh my gosh, it's like when I was doing youth ministry before and working only with missionary kids, every time it's always usually about junior year, senior year in high school. Parents are coming in. I can't. They're driving me. They're stressing me out, and so the parent-child issue, always a huge issue of conflict that's pretty normal between teens and missionary kids. So regardless of that. Figuring out relationships. While I think there's always nuances and difference to some of these, I mean, that's figuring out love and how to have a relationship. Missionary kids, I think, deal with different layers on that, but it's still, as much as TV makes it seem like American kids have it all figured out or monoculturals do, they do not. They're struggling and they're trying to figure it out and embarrassing their way through that as well. So there is a lot in common. It just often is there's unique twists that happen with the missionary kid family and group that just makes it a little different. So
Awesome, very good. So we'll go to the last question here, and then we'll open up for some questions and Q&A at the end here. But what advice would you give a monocultural person who wants to do ministry for MKs or to mentor an MK?
hmm I have to admit, like it's something I kind of try. I shouldn't say try. I try to avoid acknowledging that I'm a monocultural. I because when it comes out, for most missionary kids, they're so quick in deciding whether they're going to trust you or not. And it's like lightning fast. And so, if people don't know that I'm a monocultural, they're more apt to allow me to continue the relationship with them. And so for many monoculturals, it is very difficult to effectively work with missionary kids without having some significant international experience. And a significant international experience does not mean a 1 week trip with your church, okay, a vacationary trip. That's not what I'm talking about. But it's hard to do it unless you're willing to live and see and experience what living cross culturally is like. And that only gives you the ability to kind of understand in a deeper sense what they're going through. For a monocultural to work with missionary kids and do that well, one of the things they have to do is be willing to listen and ask questions in a non-judgmental way. And that can be very hard because oftentimes in relationship, we're looking for connection and like, oh, you like such and such, football team. Well, I like that football team too, or football or baseball or whatever. And so you're looking for places of connection. And if you connect, great, then you're going to see how many places you connect. And the more you connect, the stronger the friendship and the bond is going to go deeper. For monoculturals, it can be hard to find those places of connection with TCKs and missionary kids. And so you have to be willing to drop all of the pretenses of like, I have to understand, and you have to move to a place of appreciation and respect and interest in that. And so I felt like God has wired me in a way, even from younger on, where I love hearing people's stories. I love asking questions. I love like walking alongside people and hearing what's going on in their life. In fact, if I'm just brutally honest, I don't like talking about myself. I'd rather, like, this is weird for me to do. I'd rather like just talk and listen and like ask questions. And if I find out an MK has been from a country I've never met someone from, that like super excites me because I'm like, tell me about that place. What was it like to live there? And I'm like, ooh, what kind of food did you eat there? And of course the MK loves that because then they got to talk about things that most people don't seem to care about, or like the conversation ends as soon as they you lived in Tibet. Oh, okay, cool. And then they want to move on. I'm like, Tibet, tell me about it. What's it like there? What's winters like there? Who do you know there and stuff? What'd you do for school? How'd you get around? I'm starting to ask all these questions, and they're like, oh, you're asking questions. You care about somewhere that I care about. So I'm wired differently in that way. And I think it helps as a monocultural if you can be wired that way, show interest, curiosity, without putting down oh my gosh, you ate chicken liver there for whatever, you eat sopa de pato de pollo, oh my gosh, that's so gross, you're not being, but like, oh, you ate cockroaches, really, that's so cool, what did it taste like, instead of, oh, I could never, like show interest, learn, let them process, and learn how to let them debrief and tell their story to be a safe person. If you can do that, and as you learn to understand the international community better, I feel like that goes a long way. But MKs tend to have these cards that they play. Oh, how many passports do you have? Oh, you were born overseas? Whoa. Oh, you're like the more MK there. How many languages do you speak? And you guys do these one-upping things. And so when I'm discovered to not be a missionary kid, that's like, oh, I kind of get put on the back sometimes, and that's okay. I get that. So I will say it is hard for monoculturals to move into that area. But I would say a challenge to you guys as missionary kids, be willing to trust some monoculturals to do that. Dave Pollock, if you're not familiar with who he was, he opened up this whole world of TCK and normalizing what you guys are going through. And a lot of the things that you've been taught are based off of him. He was a monocultural. He had a couple of years overseas experience, but he was a monocultural. And so there's some amazing monoculturals who are great people to build relationships with. And if you're a monocultural wanting to work with missionary kids, it's going to take time. It takes years to build those relationships and for you to build enough street credit to be trusted with some of these amazing stories and experiences.
Awesome. So I have two more questions that kind of popped in my mind, and I want to run them through you and see what more we can get from you. So, like, how is your support? Because MK ministry is usually the ministry that is way in the backwoods. I mean, you don't know of that many MK ministries that help MKs. And so I was just kind of curious, how was the support that you had when you went into that in the MK ministry? Because you kind of probably like pioneered in a certain area that had little, very few people, or maybe there was some people, but I don't know. Just something I want to throw out there and see where we can go with this.
Now, when you're saying support, obviously those are trigger words for most of us missionaries. Are you talking about financial support, or are you talking about support in going into this direction of working with missionary kids?
Support in general. I mean, both. Just like going in that direction and
Mhm.
starting, and it can be both.
Yeah. Um, so it if you're going to go into missions and raise financial support and you tell people I'm going to do church planting, they have context, they understand what a church is, and they know the idea of planting a church. Got that. If you try and explain that you're going to be a youth pastor or work with missionary kids, you just get this confused look. Why do you need to do that? Their parents are with them, aren't they? Why do they need? What's different about them? They're just kids, right? And so you can't just in a simple word or phrase explain to someone who's unaware what working with missionary kids is about. You have to explain, okay, well, if you can imagine, if you were to take, and you have to usually make it personal, take your family suddenly and move to another country and you're learning a language and stuff, do you think that's going to be hard on you as a family? Yeah, and what are you going to do for your kids' education? What are you going to do for your kids, and how are they going to make friends with the? Oh, yeah, yeah. Well, see, then my job is to go and help them and help their kids transition. Because if they spent most of their life in another country, don't you think you'd feel more connected to that country than this country? Oh, I hadn't thought about that. Well, now I'm like 30 minutes into a presentation on them, and they just wanted the quick answer. So I can't tell you how many times I've gone to a church or talked to somebody and they said, okay, we got 5 minutes to give you, give me the moment for missions in church. Oh my gosh. Sure. In 5 minutes, I'm going to explain to you some of the unique issues facing TCKs and missionary kids. And it's difficult. So the complexity of trying to open a person's mind up to what the needs are, why there's urgency, why it's important, how you're doing it to someone who's not familiar with that, it's very difficult. Now, if I were to talk to missionary parents, I don't even have to explain to them what I do. They go, thank you for what you do. So then what I do is I try and turn those people like, go talk to my pastor at my church and explain to him why you think it's helpful what we're doing. So, yeah, I don't know. Was that what you're looking for,
That
Dennis?
No, that was perfect. It just
Okay.
it answered the question because it is an area that's hard to explain. So you put some interesting points into perspective. And I'm sure we could probably go on with more questions with that, but I think we're kind of running low on time here. So I wanted to jump back to our last question, but I inverted it. And so what advice would you give MKs to work with monocultural teens? If an MK were to go back to the US and they
Uh,
were to work with it, what what advice would you give?
So let's say you're a missionary kid, you've lived most of your life overseas or part of your life overseas, you come back to the States, and are you talking about education, like as a school teacher? Are you talking about as a youth pastor, or what
Uh,
context?
we're talking more in the context of youth ministry, like
Okay.
working with the youth.
Yeah. I think that kids in the US, monocultural teens, are very interested and more willing to listen to the stories of missionary kids. And they find them fascinating. And while they can be sometimes maybe disbelieving a little bit, they're a little quicker to suspend judgment. If you're in a position of authority as an adult to youth pastor, they're more apt to believe you and your stories. And they find it fascinating to hear about a world outside of their own. And so sharing those, pacing yourself, don't unload the whole package at once, like save some, like give it to them in small doses. If you're teaching or something, I would say every time throw a little illustration of, hey, when I was in Brazil or when I grew up in, and throw in a little story. But please do yourself a favor and them don't tell all of your illustrations. That like limit yourself to a few per time. But it's amazing. I've seen some of the missionary kids just be fantastic youth pastors because one, many times as missionary kids, you experience God in a different way than most monoculturals do. You've seen God maybe support your family financially in ways and unexpected ways. You've seen sometimes God act in miraculous ways, even maybe supernatural ways that the American church is not comfortable with or aware of. And so you bring some different depth to it. You've seen what happens when people who never get to hear the gospel be saved, and maybe be part of that work on the front lines. Maybe you were even doing some things overseas. And so you bring a different side of the faith that is sometimes missed in the typical church. So it's a precious gift to share that to monoculturals. I feel like they are more receptive to that, and you bring that third dimension. You bring some colors to the palette that they otherwise would miss out on, and so it's a true gift. I love it. I love training up my missionary kid student leaders and sending them out to their churches to be involved in the helping out the programs there. And they always did a phenomenal job. They have a heart for ministry usually already. They get Jesus and are able to articulate them in ways that people appreciate and keeps their attention when they're telling them funny stories about the time they pulled a prank on their sister by sticking a scorpion in their shoe or something like that, you know.
Awesome, that is good. I really enjoyed the conversation, just learning from your wisdom and experiences, and it really helped me, and I believe that it will help many others. And I really look forward to putting this out in different pieces and different places, and I'm sure it'll bless and benefit many other people as myself. I'd like to open up for any questions, like open up the microphone. Could you do that, Spencer? And then we could just have a minute. We can splice this. So if you talk about something that is sensitive or you don't want to be public, we can make sure that that gets cut out. But we'd like to record it also, just in case there's something good we can just throw in at the same time.
Mic is
Anybody have a
open. You
question?
can unmute yourself and ask away.
We don't want to take too long, but we want to make this time available. Question? All right, I guess
We got it.
we nailed it, Brett. So, Brett, do you have like one last thing you want to say, just like that you didn't say before, just kind of like finish off with a golden key?
Maybe I would say pass it forward what you have learned and experienced. There are MKs who are coming behind you who need some encouragement and support, and so invest in those. Many of you have probably had someone invest in you at one point, and so invest in others. Reach back to the schools maybe that you were part of overseas, or look for MKs coming through your church. Ask to be in part of your missions committee if you have a church that you're part of, and ask to be part of that. If you're like Michelle living overseas, like be a voice and an advocate in that international community to pull those people together and say, hey, I get your kids, I understand them. Let me take them in and love on them and help them understand transition and normalize some things that may have been hard for you. So that would be my exhortation to you. Again, you guys have been blessed. I'm not saying all blessings are great. Some blessings are hard. I think of the mixture of the blessing that Abraham gave. Oh man, I just lost his other name. Jacob and Isaac. Wait, no. Who's the other one? Who's the one that got like more of a curse than a blessing? You know what I'm talking about?
Jacob and
Is it Esau?
Esau. Yeah, Esau. There you go. Esau, like, I want a blessing. Well, all I've got is a curse, so here you go. It's like, he still got, there was a blessing in there, but it was like a hot mess of things. And so as MKs, you have a blessing, but there is some hard things in there. But utilize that and tap into what God has given you and pay it forward, or look for opportunities to not just hold it within, but to share it out.
Awesome. Thank you so much, Brett. We loved
Yeah.
having you on this evening. It was a tremendous blessing. Thank you so much for sharing your heart, and may the Lord continue to bless you in your ministry and the journey you're on.
Thanks,
and we
Des.
love you.
Yeah.
Campus ministers love you, and thank you once again.
Yeah, thanks.